Welcome to Trustee Talk. I'm Dick Murgatroyd, and our guest today is Anderson Township Trustee Russ Jackson. You're no stranger to this show, so
no, nor am I a stranger to Anderson Township.
And not a stranger to Anderson Township. So, but it's my pleasure to meet you and have an opportunity to visit with you. And your subject today, I think, is really fascinating because I think it's and the subject today is quality of life. But I think that's a subject that a lot of people don't quite understand, and they don't really understand the role it plays in the success of a community. So I guess I would start out by saying, how do you define quality of life?
Very subjective. I read I think it's called the Happy Earth Survey for Quality of Life, and they included a economic footprint and determined that in the entire world, Costa Rica had the best quality of life. So my definition is totally different than most of these others. And you know, the longer you make the list, the more likely that one of these oddballs will jump in. I define quality of life is that you have a place where the pluses far outweigh the minuses, the goods far outweigh the bads, and you have a place where people want to come to live compared to other places. That may seem like an esoteric definition, but that's really what it's all about in our context. Quality of life is important. I get complaints from my friends, particularly folks in the Tea Party, where they say, well, how do you justify quality of life as a reason to spend taxpayers' dollars? Because that's not a basic service. Well, oddly enough, if you work it backwards, you'll see that quality of life is what funds all those other programs.
Absolutely.
Because it funds, it supports and enhances property values. And in a township where most of our revenues come from property values, that's the most important factor. So you say, how do you define it? I think the best people to ask are the real estate people, because they will tell you that when you have a community where you have homes that aren't on the market for more than 30 days, where you have a constant small inventory of houses for sale, that means something is positive.
Absolutely.
You know, we're not perfect, but we have a nice package. I know the school folks would want to say, well, the reason people come here is because of the schools. And they're very important, but they are part of the package. Parks. We have the #1 park district in the state of Ohio. We have for many years, and that's part of the package. Our green space program, that attracts people. Our fire and safety, people feel safe. We did a survey. I had asked that we incorporate last year in our survey that we do during Anderson Days about whether or not people felt safe. We had 92% of the respondents, all respondents, said that they felt safe. And that meant that they had the perception that they were safe. Didn't mean they were safe, but they felt safe. And that was the key to it. One last part of that package, and I'm sure there are others, but is the government itself, where you have an efficient government, low taxes, close to the people kind of government, that tries not to do too many stupid things. Governments always do stupid things, but,
well, you know.
But you try not to do too many. That's the package that makes quality of life.
Well, you know, and really, as you said, it can be so many different things. There isn't any one thing that, and because it depends on the individual. To one person, you know, the schools might be the most important thing. To somebody else, the green space, parks might be more important to them. But it's the combination of all of that that is what really, I think, makes the difference. And really, when people are looking to come into a community, you know, those are the kind of questions they ask. And you're a very successful community. When you put all that together, you're extremely successful.
Well, we do all right. We're not perfect. You know, we're far from perfect, but hey, one I did leave out is our trail system.
Oh, yeah.
That's something that's in the minds and hearts of a lot of people today. 15 years ago, it wasn't that big a deal, but now it is a big deal. So all of those pieces are what makes it an attractive community.
And as a government, I guess your approach as far as, none of that happens overnight, and do you all really look at all of those different aspects and look at how you can improve those as the government of this
Yeah, and
township?
you have to be very careful because it has to be a fine balance. You don't want to ever do anything that competes with the private sector.
Right.
Whether it's like in this building that we're in, we didn't build a gym. Why would we build a health center when you have it in the private market nearby? Basically built this building for the primary purpose of attracting people to stay in their community at the end of the day so that they could go to the restaurants in the community, not drive outside the community. That was our primary purpose here, and that's why it's in the center of the community. It's not a community center in the sense that a lot of people think. But you can do a lot of these things without spending the money, but by encouraging the mindset of the people that it's what you're trying to accomplish. From the government's viewpoint, and I once again tying it back, all of our revenues derive from property taxes. We out of every tax dollar that people spend in Anderson Township, barely 15.5 cents, less than 15.5 cents, out of every dollar comes to the township to do all the things that we do. Fire, safety, roads, all of those things. So we have to spend those dollars wisely, but the more important thing is we have to protect and enhance property values. I think as a community, you're either going up or you're going down. And while you don't want to rise too fast, you've got to keep improving, not necessarily growing, but improving, and that's where you maintain property values. Without that, then you have to raise taxes because you don't have enough revenue to provide the basic services, and then you're in trouble.
Which you go back full circle because it's those quality of life issues that do maintain those property values.
Exactly. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Because without good, sound property values, you don't have the kind of low rates of housing stock available. We have problems when 89.5% of all your residences are single family, owner occupied. That means you're missing part of the package, and it's the biggest problem, and I've talked about it on this show before, is the fact that empty nesters in our community can't afford to downsize. Young people, families that have lived here forever and their children want to stay here, can't afford to live here. And that's kind of the focus that we currently are having and our committees are focusing on. Our Riverfront Committee spent a great deal of time talking about the development of that kind of facility along the north side of Kellogg Avenue. The folks down in the Encore on that plan doing the very same thing. And even our Beachmont Corridor group and our Economic Development Committee are focusing on what they can do, not a lot, we're not talking about big projects, but what they can do to provide that missing ingredient. And it's going to take private development, not the government. It's just going to take motivation and impetus created by the government, not government money to do it.
Yeah, that's a good point because I think, that's where the government really, I think, can perform a tremendous service and is a tremendous asset in that you're able to provide the encouragement and I'm sure some incentives to the private sector to actually do make the investment and
yes.
make it happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, if the government has to do it, you know you got problems.
Oh, yeah.
It's not going to work.
Don't let that happen.
That won't work. One of the things, going back, and we get a lot of talk about Section 8 housing. It puts the fear of God in a lot of people. Oh, my God. Pardon me. The best way to defend against a surge of Section 8 housing is to keep your property values up. Because these folks, Hamilton County Metropolitan Housing, for example, they have a price point. And as long as you keep your resale values above that price point, you're not going to have a problem. If you let it drop, it's going to happen. So that's not to say that that Section 8 housing is going away or it's not necessary. It's going to be there whether we like it or not. But it does impact property values. Going back to why, more than anything else, is perception. That's what quality of life is, and that's a perception that this is a nice place to live, a perception that Section 8 housing lowers property values. Perception is reality, as you well know, Dick. So.
Well, and when you look at Anderson Township, as you talked about the fact that it's a very conducive to living as far as residential is concerned, but you also have managed to provide all of the amenities that help make it such a great place, because you don't have to go very far to get a very good meal in Anderson Township. The services are all here. You really don't have to, you don't have to go across town to get most of the things that you need, which I think is another, but that says a lot for the government that has provided that ability for, retail and that to have a good base here.
And I think base is probably the best term because, we don't have this thriving business community. We don't have a Kenwood Mall.
No.
And we never will because our position off of the interstate where we have no visibility, easy accessibility, but no real visibility, those things hurt us. But we have a nice community of 45,000 or so people. We have an average household income that's somewhere around 50% greater than the local average and the state average. So we have a lot of pluses. And I know a lot of people say, well, why can't we have more upscale restaurants? Product of the people.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
Where they spend their dollars.
That's right. That's right. But you do have, you have some nice eateries that are not just your normal fast food eateries, and that people can go to, and I guess Anderson really stretches a little beyond what I think most people think of in terms of the territory that you all take in.
It is quite large. We have 32 square miles.
Yeah.
We have 16 and a half miles of riverfront. 7 miles of Ohio riverfront, and then the rest is the Little Miami. So the only place we don't have riverfront is the Claremont County line, but it is 32 acres. What's really interesting in that is that over 21% of all of our community is either green space, parks, or farmland that will stay in perpetuity, we would hope.
Good for you.
In that condition. But, we have downsides. One of the real goods and bads that you have is that our lot sizes are large. Well, that's good, but that also means we have less density. So there's a balance there.
Well, but I don't know that that's all bad. I think because that's probably another attraction.
It is.
To people that they're not on top of each other.
Right. We don't have a whole lot of more buildable.
No. Well, you probably
properties.
that is as you said earlier. That's in a way that's a plus and a minus because you're pretty much you have what you have, and the only way you move in is if somebody moves out, so to speak.
Just the other day, we had for the first time in years a another small subdivision approval. We just don't have any land available to build any larger subdivisions. We have some infill locations left, but not really a whole lot. The thing that I personally have been focusing on for the last couple of years is to make sure that we're ahead of the redevelopment curve.
Yes.
As I said, you know, your community's either going up or down. We have parts of our community that need to be upgraded, and we're trying to focus on those areas now to see what we could do to enhance the upgrading. Some of them will, I expect, some of them will actually be homes that will be torn down so that we can provide a whole new style of properties, and those are the ones that are zoned for the smaller lots.
Oh, are they? Oh,
So
okay, there you
that
go.
allows for the density. We don't have to change the zoning. But the redevelopment curve is the real key.
That's
In fact,
interesting,
we
yeah.
just sent out our Economic Development Committee just sent out a survey to all the real estate people, quite a lengthy survey, to try to determine which areas could best be served through this improvement, what it can do, you know, what opportunities. We all know what we'd like to have. The question is, where do we start? How do we do it? And do they support what we're saying? Does what we're saying make sense to them?
Well, it does. Let me just remind everybody that you are watching Trustee Talk, and our guest today is Anderson Township Trustee Russ Jackson. We're talking about quality of life issues in Anderson Township. My name is Dick Murgatroyd, and I'm your host for the show. You know, that you bring up an interesting point there, because there's a lot of planning that you all are doing. I mean, as I've heard you talk today, you're not sitting back and waiting for something to happen. You're really looking ahead to the issues that are going to come up eventually, and you're already kind of working on those and making plans, which says an awful lot. I think that's why the community is as nice as it is and as good as it is, because you're a planning group also.
I only have about 30 productive years left in my life. Then I'm going to retire.
And then you're going to do something else.
And take on another career. So we have to plan. We really have to. We have to think about our children and our children's children. We have to see that if we don't do something, what we have today and the quality of life we have today will disappear.
It will be. That's right.
I mean, you look at what's called the inner ring of communities around Cincinnati. You know, these people have been really troubled because they didn't do anything. They didn't change anything. They were reliant on industry that paid revenues, and then when that industry went somewhere else, they woke up one day and said, "Oh my goodness, what are we going to do now? How are we going to pay for our roads and our police and our fire and the rest?" So we really have to think outside the bureaucracy.
Well, you got to be proactive instead of reactive. I think that makes the difference.
Exactly.
And plan for it. I saw an interesting article in the Insight, April issue of Insight, which is excellent issue. I'm sure a lot of people read that, but it's well done. And if anybody wants to know what's happening in Anderson Township, all you do is read this, and it brings you right up to speed. But there's an interesting article in there about the plans integral to protect and encourage high quality of life, and what some of the things that are on the horizon. What are some of the things that you're looking at with regard to some of those issues?
There's no simple thing, you know, and I'm going to give you an example, is the Trails program. The Trails program has been around for quite a number of years, and we started building these little segments, and people would look and say, well, that goes from there to there. Yeah. As we infill, as we complete the various, all of a sudden people are waking up and say, oh my God, now everything connects, connect the dots.
It just takes a while.
It just took a while to build them, because you're just not going to go out and spend a humongous amount of dollars to build a system that you don't even know whether it's the right thing to do. But that's the kind of thing that you do. You keep doing more of the same. As I said, the Getting ahead of the redevelopment curve is absolutely essential. Making sure that people have continue to have the right perception regarding our fire and safety, so important. When 92% of the questionnaire respondents to Anderson Days last year spoke about the fact that they felt safe in the community. That's important. It's not a matter of whether you're safe or not, it's whether or not you feel safe. You may be absolutely safe, but if you don't feel safe, that's not
well, that's true. And of course, that's an area in itself that the cost to provide that continues to grow. And you have to find that revenue somewhere, and that's where you have to make decisions as to how do you balance that all out, because that doesn't stay the same either. And I think a lot of people don't realize that.
And you're right. And I'm going to talk about budgets. We've done a lot to continue to reduce our annual budgets over the last 5 years or so. We've reduced about 4% a year for each of the last 5 years.
Which is pretty admirable.
But when you have certain factors, for example, the fire department, classic example. If you take out the fire trucks, which we pay for with tax increment financing dollars, 92% of the entire operating budget is personnel.
Yes.
Or personnel related, whether it's insurance or health insurance or whatever. 92%. There's not a lot of, of optional dollars hanging out there to spend. Now, the only answer to that is to have less people, and that's where that can create major problems with less people. So you have to try to balance these things, but we've been pleased with our ability to not have to go back to the taxpayers. We have not had a levy on the ballot for 13 years.
That's really amazing.
We have now, based on current, no need to even think about it for at least another 3 to 4 years, based on anticipated revenues, as long as property values stay where they are or enhance. And we did have a drop, as everybody had a drop, about 7% across the board 2 to 3 years ago, whenever that last revaluation. But the whole idea is that we can continue, if things go well, and a few things, a couple of the developments like the Encore area and the riverfront area continue at their same level, we could go 20 years. I know people look and say, what the heck are you talking about? 20 years without it?
Yeah.
But if you do things, we had one good one. Vicki Earhart, our crack administrator, got her people, all the staff involved in coming up with suggestions to save money. Absolutely amazing how much we got out of our own employees to help make cuts in areas that nobody even noticed. These aren't the ones that the ones that, we'll lay off all our air traffic controllers and try to get people's attention. There's scare tactics, and all those are. These were just sound things, and you add them all together and say, well, that's pretty significant. So,
but that says a lot, I think, for you all and your staff. I think because I get the feeling that they really have an investment in this community and realize how important that is, and they're willing to make a little sacrifice here and there. Because you really have been and when you think about it, because of the economy and that we've gone through, and yet you all have managed to maintain and keep a pretty level, existence out there. And so you've done a good job fiscally, which is where governments get in trouble.
Yeah. You know what, the biggest single thing, and of course I spent my entire business career in the heavy-duty truck business, but the biggest single factor causing governments to get in trouble is overhiring.
Yes.
Or making commitments that you couldn't get out of. and it gets you every time. If you overhire, now the only way you can cut back is unhire,
Yep, that's
or
right.
you make long-term commitments. We have, I think, 7 years left on some bonds that we used to build this building. The reason we went with the bonds was because we had enough cash to pay for about half of it, and rather than doing something else, we went out and got some bonds. But that's the extent of our long-term debt.
That's pretty good.
7 years, boom, it's done. And we feel good about that. That's why we got such a great Moody's credit rating.
Of course.
We have a AA plus credit, AA1.
Which is important.
Which isn't if we ever wanted to borrow any money, but we don't want to borrow any money.
You know, but good for you. I mean, I think, you know, that's, again, I think, and we're down to about a few minutes here, but I think that, again, says a lot for you, because I think you're very fiscally responsible in that you're not, because I think sometimes, you know, the tendency is that, you know, that you want to spend because that shows that you're doing something. And I think, at least I understand, you don't spend, and they may not see that you're doing something, but you're really providing them with definitely a community that is a very solid community and contains all of these elements that make it a great community, and so that says a lot.
I remember when I first got into this business 18 years ago or whenever it was, the one thing that I wanted to take out of the private sector to impart on management of this government was the ability of our people to discern the difference between needs and wants.
Yes.
And to me, that is the key.
It is.
Because, as you just said, Dick, if the money's there, then why don't we spend it?
Yep, absolutely.
Well,
yeah, but they don't look beyond that point, though.
because it's government. That's right, government. That's different.
Yeah, it is. That's exactly right. But you know, and they spend themselves into disaster.
I remember the first day, Economics 101, University of Cincinnati. I never forget this. And the first thing that the professor talked about was that didn't matter going into debt if you were borrowing from yourself. That was his. And I'm thinking, what? What? My simple mind said, "That's crazy." But that was the big thesis that he would trying to grind into our heads. Well, I'm sorry, I don't buy that.
No, not a good way to go.
No,
not a good way to go.
Well, and that was only a few short years ago, by the way.
Is he still teaching?
Good Lord, he's probably retired and in Florida playing golf.
Russ, I have thoroughly enjoyed meeting you and having you on the show. And I look forward to many more.
Good. How about tomorrow afternoon?
I will do it.
That'd be great.
We can do that.
Sure.
We thank you all for joining us on Trustee Talk, and look forward to having you back again. So we hope you'll make this a regular habit in your home. In the meantime, thank you for being with us. I'm Dick Murgatroyd, and we hope you have a great week.